Hello, I am going to present a part of my intermediate progress on my doctoral research. The title for this presentation is Mapping the Past for Future Resilience, Evolution of Landscape and Water Representation in Historical Maps of Jakarta and Bogor. My name is Purnama and I am a doctoral researcher in geometry. I am investigating the relation of landscape and water with settlements in Greater Jakarta. Jakarta is the capital city of Indonesia, but with unreliable disasters, including floods, the Indonesian government is moving the capital city to a new location. I argue that planners and architects need more tools to incorporate landscape into regional planning. Take a look at this base map from ESRI, which emphasized roads and highways. This kind of map become normal. Maps are one of the main tools for designing region. So, how do we see more in the maps, especially the relation with landscape and water? Well, Jakarta has a long history of colonialism, and controlling water is rooted in colonialism. Jakarta was colonized by Dutch, who is expert in manipulating water. Since the 16th century, a lot of maps has been produced to understand the landscape and water. As the Simini stated, map depicts different level of resolutions, different sources, but the most important part is the different points of view. This research methodology is using historical maps for analysis and eventually use few cases for mapping. I divided the three historical period into first pre-colonial era, second is colonial era 1 from 17th century to 19th century, and then the last one is the colonial era 2 plus modern from 19th century until to the 21st century. I will explain the division along the presentation. So first is the pre-colonial maps. In this period, in the 16th century, the name Jakarta was not even used. Sunda Kalapa was the original name, belonged to the Sundanese kingdom as a port city. Maps were poorly inaccurate. The Sundanese themselves never used maps or any similar methods. The Portuguese came first in the 16th century before the others. This is a remarkable map done by Lafarga showing the capital of Sundanese kingdom. At this period, Sundanese were in the threat of coastal Muslims, and Portuguese was trying to establish a cooperation with the Sundanese, but eventually fell out and the Sundanese kingdom were fallen to the Muslims. If we zoom at it, we can see the simple figure of landscape. We have understandable river lines which are drawn parallel northward, and the city are always referred to the rivers. Modern Jakarta were named Sakatara, although principally it is the same name, coming from the Muslim Sultan Jayakarta. The city was small, especially compared to Bantam, which was a very important trade Muslim city at that time. Meanwhile, modern Bogor, named Dayu, which was the main city of the Sundanese kingdom, located further in hinterland. Sundanese planning were in opposite with today's preference. The capital were in hinterland and smaller port cities were in the coast. While now Jakarta is in the coast and Bogor serves as a satellite city on hinterland. The Sundanese could argue that they might understand the inhospitable of coasts as a main city. That's why they don't put the main city at the coast. Second is the colonial era 1, from 17th century until 19th century. The Dutch, under the name of VOC, successfully established a fortress named Batavia next to Jayakarta settlement. The Dutch settled in the east bank of Ciliwung River, and the Muslim Jayakarta city were on the west bank. This was a very brief period. Eventually, the Dutch eradicated the Muslim settlements and conquered the West Bank. What you see here is a canal plan made by a drafter Venant. There is a new canal on the West Bank. Also in the East Bank, you can see all addresses were always related through a canal, making it a water city, similar to most of the Dutch cities in the lowland. Pay attention also to the coastline. In this period, the sea is up to the fortress. A century later, the city developed into a water canal city. Every part of the city is canalized, extended beyond. Please see Professor De Mulder's article in Water Urbanism East if you are interested to understand more. The sea that was in line with the fortress, now it was extended kilometers away from it. Speculations were showing that the extension came from the sediments of the river, but also because of a short period of little ice age. Nevertheless, it shows that landscape is always changing, especially when it is related to water. Only after almost a century later, the Dutch started the expansion towards the hinterland. By this time, the kingdom was long gone. A great city filled with tropical forests. This map is actually come in 1811 and should be in the next category, but I want to show you the regional landscape of Jakarta and Bogor. Compared to the Portuguese map, which was simpler, these offer a complex understanding of the river system. This map also shows all the irrigation canals, showing how the Dutch altered the landscape for colonial profit purpose. The Sundanese kingdom became an obsession to a governor-general at that time. The debate is still going, but the governor's palace could be built in the previous Sundanese kingdom site. If you see the 1760 map, you can see the settlements were always related to a river tributary. And these two rivers are in two different river basins. One goes to the west part of Jakarta, while this one goes to Jakarta. By 1808, on the next map, you can see so many alterations drawn by these straight lines of canals, merging the two river basins. What the Dutch did by merging the two river basins could be arguably catastrophic. That might contribute why the overflow of Ciliwung River is still happening today. But how did the canal were constructed? We can understand that by looking at this map. This Ciliwung River map divided into two parts. So this part are the southern part with the north is down, while this one is the continuation towards the north. The straight lines are the canals, while the meandering ones are obviously the river. Not only that, but the map maker were also drawn this line, which shows where there is a big dip that can be understood as the floodplain. If we zoom at it, you see that this understanding of floodplains says a lot of how both the Dutch and the locals were settling. The palace sits on the higher ground between the two rivers, while most of the villages gathered around the source of the water, either a lake or a sprout, not settling in the floodplain. The canal were constructed always along the higher ground, not hitting the floodplains. The purpose of this canal was for irrigation, so it might be understood that this is the source of the fresh water, while the farms drain to the river. Is the floodplain that important to be drawn? We have to take a look at this painting by Johannes Raj in 1769. He drew this from eastern part of the palace looking to the palace. If you see the scale of the person and the stairs is this small, so then the floodplain were deep. This painting quite picture how the settlements were located, which is always on the higher ground, while floodplains filled with the farms. The styles of the floodplains were also drawn in these cadastral maps, showing the importance of the floodplains as the land value. The plot lines were drawn started from the main road, which mostly situated in the higher ground, and it ends by the rivers. This is the last map of the colonial era 1, where I argue that this was the period of explorations and experimenting with drawing rivers and floodplains, which arguably is easier to understand than nowadays maps, which never highlighted the floodplains anymore. Now we enter the colonial era 2 plus the modern. I merged these two eras because they have similarities. They standardized maps and see land as a two-dimensional thing, which start to lose the micro-topographic understanding of landscape. Both periods were also extremely expanded to the population exponentially, as you see in the photos. The floodplains that were filled with greenery become urban tissues. I adore this map on the right. This map is finished in 1883 but surprisingly very accurate. You can see the comparison to the S3 map, which is clearly very accurate. However, if we zoom at it, this map and any other maps in this era stop showing the floodplains anymore. The river lines, because this is a very accurate map, became a thin line and simply hidden with another graphics. You can also see this modern Bogor, which was still called Wittensorf by them, as a city with two mountains only. Based on the colonial era 1, we know that the city is more than that. It is a city where the two major rivers meet. The city settles on the higher grounds, while the floodplains were for the farms. This is a map from 1920, where administratively Bogor had boundary only between the two rivers. As a result, this map coincidentally shows again how the city were only in between two major rivers. Sadly, the floodplains drawing were not there anymore. Instead, they were replaced by topographic lines. But although replaced by topographic lines, they are very accurate. The topographic lines were every 2 meters. So far, I haven't seen any map in this scale that has 2 meters topographic lines by the government, except the DM data. On the right side, I have tried to redraw the floodplains back to the map and trace the settlement. It is clear how the colonial tissues kind of won the battle by settling the higher ground, creating a social injustice that pushes the locals that were invited to the city to be only living in a floodplain, risking themselves to be flooded. But since the style of the floodplains are gone, although could be labeled as decolonizing colonial maps, they could not know it now except understand it through their own eyes without a map. Not only kampungs, but everyone seems forgetting the understanding of the floodplains. Maps created reality, as stated by James Conrad or Andre Cornus. The linear city of Bogor became a circle city, marked by the road expansion and later added with the highways in here. Meanwhile, in Jakarta was also focused on road networks, as you can see from the 1985 master plan. Roads become the most dominant figure on the plan, connecting several cities in surrounding with thick black lines. The river lines were apparent, and green structure were on an offset from the river lines, which is kind of mimicking the floodplain line, but it is not. By 2012, the master plan was renewed and river lines were thicker, but there are no floodplains except the offset of that river lines. This came from the standardized law of river setback, that is using a simple method of making the rule. First, identify the center line of the river, then offset it by a certain distance, defined by how wide the river is. So, sadly, rivers and floodplains become a standardized unit to serve a simpler law. Now here, back to the era of Google Maps, OpenStreetMaps, on other maps that mostly serve the world full of roads. Worth to mention that the advancement of digital modeling of elevation can be powerful enough if we know what to process. For example, the right one I have tried to process the slope analysis of this area resulted that this landscape is not simply flat land but full of floodplains as the colonial maps were drawn. If I zoom in, specifically in the palace area, so here is the palace, you can see that the two rivers almost hidden by the urban tissue. For sure it is hard to see the terrain here. In the other hand, I overlay this map with the slope analysis where blue-yellowish gradient indicates the lower land while the orange indicates the higher land. The purple shows the slope. From here you can see how the rigid structure or row lots, very trademark of Dutch cities, stays in the higher land, while organic kampungs settled in lower land. Could it be that this is a form of a long history of social injustice? So as conclusion, first at pre-colonial era, the Sunnis kingdoms prefers on hinterland while Muslims settle at the coast. Simple graphics are easier to understand the perceived flood. In the colonial era 1, water is the main address on the map. The river consists of floodplains shown by remarkable style of graphic. But sadly in the colonial era 2 and modern floodplains style is missing. A river is easily hidden while road is more dominant. While maps become reality, the social injustice or settling of the higher ground become disappeared. So I gathered these sources thanks to Leiden University Digital Collections and this book of Grote Atlas van Nederland Oost-Indie. The last one is from the government of Jakarta. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. Bye.